They tucked my name card beside a pair of rolling trash cans, the kind with rubber lids that sigh when you open them. I stared at the card, mother of the groom, like it belonged to someone else. Behind me, the kitchen doors breathed out the smell of lamb I had marinated, paid for, prayed over. Laughter rose from the head table like a toast I wasn't invited to. I have swallowed worse. I have smiled through less. But today, the woman who ironed napkins until midnight will not be seated with yesterday's scraps. If respect is a seat, then I will stand. If dignity is a plate, I'll decide who eats. Watch carefully. This is the moment I stop apologizing for taking up space. People will tell you the seat doesn't matter, that love floats above arrangements and centerpieces, but seats are maps, and maps declare borders. I fed this wedding with my savings, my sleep, my hands that smell like cumin and lemon peel. The insult wasn't the steel of the bin. It was the softness of their smiles while they placed me there. I could have begged for a better chair. I have begged before. Tonight, I will not. If my son cannot see the line they drew, I will draw one he cannot miss. I taught Aiden to clean as you cook, to pack as you travel, to decide as you hesitate. He learned the first two. The third he leaves to weather. That's why men like Robert survive the storm. They hand out umbrellas with their names engraved. Marla prefers rain only when it photographs well. Me? I have lived drenched and still set a table that made people forgive the forecast. I am done being the roof and the floor. Tonight I choose the door. They'll call me dramatic, ungrateful, difficult, titles tossed like rice. But I have worn worse crowns. Divorcee, immigrant, caterer, instead of guest. Maybe I don't belong at their head table. Fine. I belong wherever I refuse to be small. And if they think a woman who cooked for them will never stop cooking, they have mistaken hunger for obedience. Watch the room when the plates stop arriving. Listen to what silence tastes like. Auror. Q. I'm not leaving because they seated me by the trash. I'm leaving because they told me who I was to them, and I believed them for one breath too long. The meal was my gift. Respect was the only thing I asked in return. Gifts can be taken back when the card is forged. The door is open. My team is ready. My name is mine again. Aiden found me on the dock with the look he wore as a boy when he broke the good bowl. Sorry first, then hoping I would fix it. He said it was a misunderstanding. A last-minute shuffle. That Marla's aunt needed an outlet for her oxygen machine. He asked me not to make a scene, as if the scene wasn't already built and furnished around me. I watched his mouth shape apologies that protected everyone but the person he was apologizing to. I told him I would not eat humiliation to keep their timeline clean. He reached for my hand and I let him hold it, because love doesn't vanish when respect does. But I also slid my keys into my palm, the ones that open every oven, every van, every door I have paid for. He said he would fix it. I said I was listening. He didn't hear the clock start. Inside, the apology arrived wearing perfume and logistics. The planner bustled. Marla glided. Robert laughed like ice in glass. My card was reassigned to a table near the photo booth, the one with novelty sunglasses and plastic tiaras. I was told I'd be closer to the action there, as if proximity to a ring light is the same as belonging. Robert said these things happen in big events. Lily smiled the way people smile when they're steering a car through fog. I could feel the room deciding that my silence would be the ribbon on the fix. I've tied so many ribbons for other people, on gifts I bought, on boxes I carried, on wounds I hid. I looked at Aiden, who was already nodding, relieved the mess might be swept somewhere invisible. I stood beside the chair. They offered and measured the distance between being seen and being placed. Back in the kitchen corridor, the manager tried a different key policy. He said the contract required continuous service once dinner began. I told him the contract sat in my name, that my team answered to me, and that respect wasn't an optional garnish. He said guests were hungry. I said I knew. I had spent 2 days feeding a future that just told me where it thinks I belong. Tess stood beside me like a wall that learned to breathe. Jamal drifted close, ears catching things I might miss. The manager lowered his voice, asked whether I really wanted to ruin my son's wedding. That's the trick of people who hold doors. They make you the villain for refusing to crawl. I asked for a chair at the family table. He said he'd see what he could do. I said I'd do the same. Lily asked for a quick word, which is what people say when they want a long favor. She spoke about optics and timing and how the first dance needed to feel unbroken. She said she respected me, that this was all a hiccup, that families are messy. I watched her swallow the part where she could have said, "I'm sorry," and mean it. I told her I wouldn't torture Night, but I also wouldn't set myself on fire to keep it warm. She asked what I needed. I said a chair at the family table and my son beside me when I sat. She glanced toward Marla and Robert, the way passengers check a pilot's eyes mid-turbulence. "Let me handle it," she said, as if I hadn't been handling it since sunrise. I said I'd give her 10 minutes. The music ate one of them whole. The MC called families to be honored. Marla floated to the microphone, her voice lacquered, thanking vendors by name, praising Robert for bringing everyone together, and curating the menu. The room applauded the story and not the work. Aiden clapped too, eyes on the floor. I felt a familiar drift, the one that happens when other people narrate your life until you don't recognize the pronouns. I could have walked out then, taken the heat and the hunger with me, but I wanted him to see the line without me pointing. I waded through a toast that did not say my name, through a prayer that thanked abundance without touching the hands that prepared it. The lights dimmed for the first dance. 10 minutes had passed. I was no longer listening for permission. I was inventorying what belonged to me. In the dim between songs, memory opened like a walk-in freezer. Breath turned visible. Old moments stacked in labeled pans. I remembered the fundraiser where Robert took my samosas to the mayor and introduced them as his recipe. I remembered the school fair where I cooked all night, then stood behind a pillar while other mothers took bows. I remembered being young and married and told that quiet women keep families whole, and how I mistook silence for stitching instead of tape that peels in heat. I have fed people across years of weather, and they learned to eat without tasting the hands. The question was not whether I could endure another small cut. I am a quilt of healed edges. The question was whether my son would ever see the bleed if I pressed a napkin over it again. The room cheered. I counted how many ovens I own. There was a night in our old apartment when the stove went out mid-dinner and Aiden, little enough to stand on a chair, held a flashlight while I finished cooking on a borrowed hot plate. He asked if the food would still taste like a celebration. I told him flavor is stubborn. It survives bad equipment. Later, after the divorce, I learned respect is different. It wilts under fluorescent apologies and grows only where it's watered on time. I could fix tonight's menu in a dozen ways. Stagger service, switch to cold plates, smile for the photos. But every workaround would teach him the wrong recipe. I want him to taste the border in his mouth, the line between love and permission. If I leave the food, they'll call me generous. If I take it, they'll call me cruel. Either way, I will finally be called by my own name. Tess found me again, the way a true friend walks toward the loud. "Not away?" she said. The staff were ready to pull. That the van could be loaded in 8 minutes if we moved as one. I asked her if she'd regret it. She said, "Regret is what you get when you help people stay small." Jamal drifted near, half-smile. The kind you wear at the border of a decision. From the ballroom, the MC revved the room to clap for the father of the groom. Names arranged like centerpieces, easy to admire, hard to eat. I felt for my keys and thought about how many tables I've set that did not have a seat for me. There is a kind of hunger that food can't touch, the kind that grows teeth. I told Tess to prep the Cambros. She nodded once, the way soldiers salute gravity. Robert cornered me by the ice machine with the smile that used to get me to forgive receipts and late nights. He said I was overreacting, that optics are messy, that he would make it up to me. The man has a museum of future credits for debts he never pays. He framed it as saving Aiden's day, as if my dignity were a candle that could wait to be relit later. I listened the way you listen for a leak in a wall, quietly, to decide what to tear out. I told him he could carry a tray tonight if he wanted to be useful. He laughed too loud. I did not. He asked whether I really wanted our son's guests to go hungry. I said they would not starve. Hunger is a good teacher. He flinched then, just enough to show he heard a door close. I walked back toward the ballroom and saw my son at the edge of the dance floor, a boy-shaped echo wrapped in a man's tux. He looked at me the way people look at exits they don't yet know they'll take. I realized the lesson I owed him was not how to keep a party alive. It was how to keep yourself alive in a party that forgets you. When the DJ called for mothers and sons to join, I stayed where I was. My love is not a leash, and it is not a prop. It's a door I hold open and a threshold I will not cross crawling. I texted Tess one word: begin. Then I turned my phone face down. Like placing a lid on a pot, I'm ready to serve elsewhere. The music swelled. Somewhere, an engine agreed. The MC cleared his throat and called for the mother-son dance, and the ballroom pulled its breath like a curtain. Aiden took one step toward me, then another toward the head table, split down the center like a wishbone. Marla glided in with a smile lacquered to withstand hurricanes and said there'd been a tiny mix-up, and that for timing, a family representative would stand in, just for now, just to keep the night smooth. Robert lifted his hands the way men lift credit for work they never touched. The room applauded out of muscle memory. Lily's face didn't crack. It only tilted into the practiced angle of a bride who knows which side is her good one. I stood where the carpet met the tile and felt the last thread of pretending loosen. You can forgive a mistake that stumbles. This was a choice that stands. They dressed it in etiquette and called it mercy. It arrived to me as a closed door. Silence tastes like metal before rain. I let it sit on my tongue while the DJ cued a song that wasn't meant for me. Tess caught my eye from the corridor, 2 fingers brushing the rim of a Cambro. A question, not a plea. I nodded once, the smallest permission I would give tonight, and she began to stage the pull in shadows, lids clicking shut like calm punctuation. Jamal took the door, the way loyalty does, quietly. I heard the room cheer as Robert turned, one hand theatrically out for a partner he hadn't earned. Aiden's smile tried to stretch over the tear. It didn't reach his eyes. I could have rushed the floor, could have made a scene loud enough to drown the music. Instead, I chose an action that speaks in the gut more than the ear. I counted trays. I counted roots. I counted the beats until the song ended, with no place for my name to land. Lily arrived like a press release, words polished, voice low enough to read as empathy on camera. She said the substitution was temporary, that they were protecting the timeline, that she didn't want the night overshadowed by logistics. She used the vocabulary of calm to replace the language of care. I told her timelines are tools, not gods, and that the only thing overshadowing her night was the shade cast by her choices. She glanced toward the photographer, always the witness you negotiate with first, and asked me to give her a few. I thought about the years I had given her by giving him, how every steady plate I served made this version of the story possible. I said 10 minutes had already become 20. She asked what I was asking her to do. I said, do what is hard while people are watching. She held my gaze, then looked away. Optics blink first. When the song ended, The MC lifted the mic for speeches. Marla went first, of course, and thanked both families for their grace under pressure. A phrase that drips like syrup over bruises. She credited Robert for coordinating the menu, and I watched heads nod, facts rearranged to fit the furniture. The applause was generous. The truth was not invited. I didn't need the microphone. I stepped 2 paces forward into the wash of the stage lights and let calm have a spine. I said to the air that carries everything in a room that I had brought a gift, and I was taking it back because a chair was refused that no plate could replace. No voice raised. No theatrics. Just an inventory spoken aloud. You could feel the room try to decide whether to be offended or impressed. Lily reached for the mic, chose smile over substance, and asked for another round of applause. The room resumed its script, but the ink had thinned. Servers hovered, waiting for cues they couldn't read anymore. I walked to Aiden, and the crowd parted the way people do for fire trucks and funerals. Respect for a danger they don't understand. I told him I loved him, and that I wouldn't teach him the kind of love that erases the person who gives it. I said I was leaving with what I brought, and that he could keep the story or keep his mother. He could not keep both in the same lie. His mouth trembled around a word that didn't come. Behind us, Tess's carts rolled. Soft thunder. Lily's hand found his sleeve, a lighthouse to optics. He looked at her, then at me, then at the door that smelled like rain and engine heat. I didn't wait for a vote. I turned toward the dock. The decision would happen where the air was honest. The first tray left the ballroom like a secret changing hands. Tess clicked lids shut with the patience of someone who knows storms by scent, not forecast. Jamal rolled the dolly as if guiding a stretcher through a crowd that couldn't decide whether it was audience or obstacle. I moved in straight lines. That's how you take back a gift. Without flourish, without apology, with inventory and a spine. The venue manager hurried beside me with a voice made of policies and penalties. I let him read the contract out loud to the part of the room that loves rules until rules burn its tongue. Each chafer closed felt like a door I should have shut years ago. People stared as if hunger were rudeness. Funny how quickly grace evaporates when it isn't plated. I didn't raise my voice. I raised my standard. If a seat is a map, then reclaiming the food redraws the border. The manager found his courage in a clause about continuous service and threatened to withhold payment already made. I took the paper from him the way you take a knife, by the handle, and pointed to the line with my company's name. Delivery contingent on reasonable accommodation. A chair at the family table, I said, is reasonable. He asked for compromise. I offered clarity. Marla swept in with a diplomat's smile, promising a beautiful solution if I would be patient. Robert mentioned reputation as if mine belonged to his pocket. I thought of the years my work wore other people's signatures and felt my mouth go still. Behind us, servers paused like birds deciding whether to migrate. I told Tess to stage the coffee urns and desserts for departure. The manager lowered his voice, asked if we could do this quietly. We are, I said. You only notice because the plates stopped lying. The buffet line thinned into rumor. Guests hovered with empty plates, eyes skimming for permission like birds looking for thermals. Lily glided from cluster to cluster, her smile stapled on, crafting phrases about brief resets and surprise late-night snacks. The language of a ship's band striking up after the iceberg. Aiden stood by the dance floor, hands useless at his sides, watching the room learn hunger. It wasn't cruelty. It was consequence, and you could see it travel table to table, tipping the centerpieces toward truth. Someone asked if there was at least bread. Someone else said this is what happens when people forget who fed them. I felt no triumph, only a rightness, cold and clean, like a key turning home. I had offered a chair. They had offered a corner. Tonight the plates answered for me. Calm held. The cart wheels whispered the sound of a boundary finally rolling into place. At the dock, the night air cooled my face the way truth cools fever. Tess counted trays, called numbers. Jamal folded ramps with the efficiency of someone who practices grace under friction. The van hummed, eager and unbothered. Aiden appeared in the doorway, framed by amber, the indecision of a good heart raised in bad weather. He said my name, not the title the program forgot, and asked what I needed. The question was late, but it was real. I told him to lift from the knees and mean it. He stepped onto the ramp. Behind him, Lily hovered, calculating the perimeter of her future. She asked him to wait. He looked at her, then at me, then at the trays that smelled like cumin and patience. He bent, hands under the weight of the first Cambro. A muscle in his jaw found a new job. The choice made no sound, and it rearranged the night. When the last tray slid home, the van smelled like a holiday I owed myself. I reached into the ballroom one final time and unplugged the strand of fairy lights that haloed the empty buffet. Not to be cruel, but to be clear. The room dimmed by a heartbeat, enough for people to feel the seam where comfort ends and character begins. Marla stood with a smile that had run out of lacquer. Robert stared at the unplugged cord like it was an offense to electricity. The manager signed the release for my equipment with the pen I handed him. I didn't look back for permission slips, only for my son, who stood at the dock with his sleeves rolled and a question answered in his shoulders. "Congratulations," I told him. Not for a wedding, but for a choice. Then I closed the van door, and the latch sounded like a promise kept. To myself first. Fallout doesn't roar. It hisses. The ballroom filled with the sound of forks on empty china, the whisper of dresses moving like grasses when weather changes mid-picnic. Someone said the caterer quit. Someone said the mother of the groom stole the food. Someone asked whether that was even legal, as if legality had fed them more than I had. Marla's voice snapped into the microphone with sugar around the edges, promising cake. Very soon. Robert laughed too brightly and called for one more round of music, the way men patch roofs with confetti. Lily's eyes followed Aiden to the door as he had started walking through. I felt the room try to reassemble a portrait without a face. Consequence is quiet and polite until it sits at every table. It did. I stood by the dock, holding the kind of stillness you earn, not borrow. The night wasn't ruined. It was honest. Aiden found me where the air smelled like diesel and cardamom. His face had the softness of a child who just discovered gravity and the grit of a man deciding to respect it. He said he was sorry. No embroidery, no logistics, just the plain cloth kind. He said he'd seen me seated by the bins and told himself it would be fixed because people like Marla and Robert always fix things, and that was the bruise. They do fix things, just not the right ones. I told him apologies are not bandages. They're doors. He asked what walking through looked like. I said choose me when choosing me costs you. Behind us, Tess stacked the last of the trays with a rhythm that sounded like a metronome for new choices. Jamal leaned against the ramp, a witness who knew how to be still. Aiden reached for a Cambro, then for my hand. Both held. Robert arrived with a smile calibrated for courtrooms and Christmas cards. He called me Nora. In that tone, that means, be reasonable. He told Aiden there were guests, reputations, vendors, and that tonight wasn't about personal grievances. I watched his syllables try to herd my son back into the pen, labeled good boy. Aiden surprised us both. He said the word. No without anger, just architecture. He said he had seen me placed beside trash and photographed around. He said love without respect is a costume, and he was tired of wearing it. Robert's mouth opened to pivot, then stalled. I didn't gloat. I remembered the man he once was, brilliant when he didn't need an audience. I told him this wasn't a punishment, it was an accounting. Lily hovered, calculating wind. Marla's bracelets clinked like tiny verdicts in the hall. The dock held its breath. A father blinked, a son didn't. Inside, a rumor turned into a story with names. A bridesmaid filmed the unplugged buffet. An uncle narrated in his phone that the mother took it all. A cousin said, "This is what happens when you don't give women their due." And for one breath, the room tasted a truth with texture. Lily tried to stem the tide with cake. Sliced early. Staged like a rescue boat. But sugar cannot carry what respect must. The DJ turned up the volume. People dance the way you dance when the floor feels slightly tilted. I didn't need vindication. I needed quiet. Tess packed knives with the tender caution of someone putting away instruments after a hard surgery. Jamal offered to drive. We formed a little island beside the van, and on it, my son stood. It looked like a future you could live on without apologizing to breathe. Before I left, I asked Aiden if he wanted to come with me, or stay, and hold his wedding up with both hands until it remembered its spine. He looked past me at the van, then back toward the ballroom where his life had been arranged like centerpieces, pretty, fragile, and not built to survive weather. He said he would speak on the mic, that he would name what happened, that he was done being the soft place where other people's sharp choices landed. I told him truth costs, and he nodded like someone counting out cash from his own wallet for the first time. He asked if I would be there when he finished. I said I would be exactly where I had always been, not behind him, pushing. Not in front, pulling. Beside him, with a chair I brought myself. He smiled, the small kind that holds. He went inside. The van door waited, patient as dignity. Aiden took the microphone like a man learning to stand in his own name. He didn't apologize for me. He apologized to me, and to the guests who came to eat a story that left out its cook. He said the seat by the trash wasn't a mistake. It was a message, and he was done living inside other people's captions. You could feel the room tilt. Some faces stiffened, some softened as if a window finally opened. He said, "Love without respect is a costume," and tonight he was taking it off, even if it meant standing in the cold for a while. He thanked me for every quiet night I kept the lights on. And then he said the part that mattered most, that my chair belongs at his table, not because I fed them, but because I am his mother. The microphone didn't tremble. The truth doesn't need vibrato. It just needs daylight and a spine. After he found me by the service doors, the room hummed with a new temperature, not warm yet, but honest. Lily approached, bouquet wilting in her hand, and said the word, "sorry," without makeup. She admitted she'd protected the photographs over the people in them, and that she'd mistaken management for care. I told her I don't need her to like me. I need her to stand next to my son when it costs both of them comfort. She asked if it was too late. I said late is still on time if you show up carrying the right thing. She looked at Aiden, then back at me, and I watched something unlearned in her eyes. Marla hovered like weather that had lost its forecast. Robert kept busy pretending to coordinate what no longer listened to him. We three stood in a little triangle of air that finally had room for truth to move between us. Marla came with a speech, dressed as etiquette, but the words kept slipping off the bone. She called me dear. The way people label boxes they plan to store. And Robert floated phrases about reputations and families being bigger than moments. Aiden didn't raise his voice. He raised his posture. He told them the guest list is not the family, and that respect is not a garnish you sprinkle after the plates go cold. He said the marriage he wants is one where both sides know the cost of their comfort and pay in real time. Lily stepped beside him and said she'd stand there too. The two of them were quiet, and that quiet did more than any speech I've heard in a rented hall. Marla's bracelets clicked once, like a gavel that suddenly remembered it can also be a mirror. Robert's shoulders sank, and for a second he looked like a man who could change. We left the noise for the dock where the night remembered itself. Tess popped the van doors and laughed. That the food had better not go to waste. Jamal found paper plates because he always finds the thing no one else thinks to look for. We ate standing up. Lamb still tender, rice breathing cardamom. Rada cool as forgiveness can safely be. Aiden took first bite and closed his eyes like a person who just unlocked a room he'd been living outside of. Lily chewed carefully, then reached for seconds, and when she said, "It's perfect," it didn't sound like optics. It sounded like gratitude. I didn't give a toast. I handed out forks. The city hummed around us, unconcerned and kind. For the first time that night, I felt full. Not from the food. From the table we made with no place cards. Just names we spoke to each other without shrinking them. By the time we packed the last tray, the night had nothing left to prove. Aiden asked if we could host a breakfast at my place in the morning. Small and true. No speeches. Just chairs that mean what they say. I said yes, and told him he and Lily could bring nothing but their hunger and a promise to keep it honest. He kissed my forehead, the way he used to before school, and it felt like a ceremony that didn't need a permit. We drove off, the van lighter than its weight, the city thinning into quiet streets that remember every woman who ever chose the door. Tomorrow there will be apologies to return or keep, invitations to rewrite, a seating chart to compost. Tonight, there is only this: a mother who brought her own chair, a son who pulled one up beside her, and a table that will not forget how it got built.